Welcome to the OpenAI Playground. Before we start writing C# code, it is useful to experiment with OpenAI models first. The Playground gives us a simple developer environment where we can enter a prompt, run it, and see the model's response. We can change our prompt, adjust available settings, and test again until we get the result we want. This helps us understand how the model behaves before connecting it to our C# and .NET application. So the main idea is simple. Experiment first, then code. The OpenAI Playground gives us a simple way to test OpenAI models before building an application. The process is very straightforward. First, open the Playground. Next, choose the model you want to experiment with. Then, enter your prompt and run it. The model processes your request and generates a response that you can review immediately. This allows us to experiment with prompts and model behavior without writing any C# code. Later, once we're happy with the results, we can take what we've learned and use it in our application. There are two ways we can begin working with the OpenAI API. We could start by writing C# code. That means creating an application, configuring HTTP client, building the JSON request, calling the API, and processing the response. But when we're still experimenting, this can take unnecessary time. Instead, we can use the OpenAI Playground. We simply enter our prompt, run it, and immediately review the response. We can quickly change the prompt and test again. Once we're satisfied with the model's behavior, we can take that design and integrate it into our C# application. So Playground helps us prototype quickly before we write the actual application code. Why should we use the OpenAI Playground? Imagine we want to test a prompt such as, explain dependency injection in C#. We could create a complete C# project, write the API code, send the request, and then check the result. But for simple experimentation, that takes extra time. With Playground, we can enter the prompt directly and get a response immediately. We can review the quality, change our instructions, and test again. Once the prompt works the way we want, we can integrate it into our C# application. So test and refine your prompt first, then build it into your application. Students often ask, why should we use Playground when we already have ChatGPT? The reason is that they are designed for different purposes. ChatGPT is mainly designed for everyday AI conversations. We ask questions, continue conversations, and use AI directly. The OpenAI Playground, on the other hand, is designed for developers. It allows us to experiment with prompts, test model behavior, and adjust available settings. This makes Playground especially useful when we're preparing prompts for an application. So in this course, we use Playground to experiment and test, and then use what we learn when building our C# and .NET applications with the OpenAI API. First, sign into the OpenAI Platform and open the Playground. Once you're inside, make sure you're working with the correct project. For example, you may have separate projects for a study app, a support bot, or a demo application. Selecting the correct project is important because your prompts and other resources can be organized around that project. For this example, we'll select the study app project. Now we're ready to start experimenting with our prompts and OpenAI models inside the Playground. Now let's create our first prompt in the OpenAI Playground. We'll start with something very simple. Explain machine learning. When we run this prompt, it is sent to the selected OpenAI model. The model processes our request and generates a response explaining the concept. And notice something important here. We haven't written any C# code yet. We can explore the model, test different prompts, and review the results directly inside Playground. This makes it a fast and simple way to understand model behavior before we start building our application. Now let's see how we can improve our prompt. Our original prompt is very simple. Explain machine learning. The model can answer this, but it doesn't know exactly what kind of explanation we want. So we can make the prompt more specific. For example, explain machine learning to a beginner using simple English and one real-world example. Keep the answer under 150 words. Now we've clearly defined the task, the audience, the style, the example, and the length. By giving the model clearer instructions, we can get a response that better matches the needs of our application. This is one of the most important ideas in prompt engineering. Clearer instructions usually lead to more useful results. When designing an AI application, it is useful to separate instructions from the user's input. The instructions define how the model should behave. For example, you are a programming tutor. Explain concepts using simple English and include a practical C# example. The user input then defines the specific task. For example, explain interfaces in C#. The model combines these instructions with the user's request and generates an appropriate response. So remember the difference. Instructions define the overall behavior. User input defines what we want the model to do right now. This separation helps us create more consistent and controlled AI applications. The OpenAI Playground also allows us to experiment with different models. We can take the exact same prompt and test it with Model A and Model B. Then, we can compare the responses. Different models may provide different levels of capability, speed, cost, and performance for particular tasks. For example, one model might be faster and less expensive, while another may be better suited for more complex reasoning. This comparison helps us choose a model that fits the needs of our application. So don't choose a model only because it is the most powerful. Choose the model that provides the right balance of quality, speed, cost, and task suitability. Now let's look at temperature. Temperature is a setting that can affect how much variation we see in the model's responses. With a lower temperature, the output tends to be more consistent and predictable. This can be useful when we want reliable and focused answers. With a higher temperature, the model may produce more varied responses. This can sometimes be useful for creative tasks or brainstorming. However, remember that available settings can vary depending on the model we're using. So when working in Playground, always check which controls are supported by the selected model. Controlling the output length is another important part of prompt design. For example, if we simply say, "Explain AI," the model may generate a long and detailed response. But sometimes, our application needs something shorter and more structured. So we can give a clearer instruction, such as, "Explain AI in no more than 5 bullet points." Now the model understands the format and approximate length we want. This can make the response easier to display and can also help reduce unnecessary token usage. So remember, clear instructions help us control the model's output. This process is called prompt iteration. We start by writing a prompt and running it through the model. Next, we review the response carefully. If the result isn't exactly what we want, we improve the prompt. Then, we run it again and compare the new response. We can repeat this process several times, making small improvements along the way. Write, run, review, improve, and test again. This repeated experimentation helps us create prompts that produce more useful and reliable results for our application.